Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be creating a web application in ReactJs using the GitHub users API, where we're going to be sending a GET request to the GitHub users API, and then we're going to be getting the 6 last repositories that were committed on GitHub from the user's profile. And then of course we're going to be displaying them on the screen. So all the information that you're seeing here on these cards is generated dynamically from the API. The repository we're going to be using is called GitHub users in my profile. You can go ahead into my profile and search for this repository, or you can click the link in the description below. So to begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this button and I'm going to copy this link. And then inside Visual Studio Code, I'm going to open up my terminal using Ctrl and J. And then inside here, I'm going to cd into my desktop. And inside here, inside my desktop, I'm going to just say git clone. And then I'm going to paste in this link, which is going to clone this repository into my desktop. And then once it does that, then I'm going to cd into github-users, and I'm going to open another instance of Visual Studio Code into this repository, or into this folder really. Okay, so this is the folder structure that we're going to have. And remember that when you clone this, you're going to be cloning the finished application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my app.js, and I'm going to remove everything inside this component. And inside here, I'm going to return a fragment with an h1 that says hello world. And then I'm going to comment this out because we're going to create these components and then we're going to be referencing them inside this file. And then these are the links to the API, and we're going to be using this third one. Next, I'm going to go into my index.css, and at the top, we have just imported the tailend directives, so the base components and the utilities. And then here we're resetting the margin and padding and setting the box sizing to border box. We are setting the max width of all the images to 100% so that they don't overflow outside of their containers or outside of the device width really. And then we are setting the list items, the unordered list as well as the ordered list, to have a list style type of none so that we don't have bulleted lists. So the body is going to have a default font family of this, which comes when you run npx create react app, and it's going to have a fallback of sans serif. And then the max width of the body is set to 76.25 rem, which is I don't know, it's about 1200 pixels or something, I've forgotten. And then the margin for this is going to be set to auto so that all the text inside the body is going to be centered. And then the padding is set to 1.25 rem so that the content is pushed inwards just a bit so that it doesn't go all the way to the edges. And then I've set the background color of the body to emerald, which is to emerald 100, which is a very slight green. And then I've set the text inside the body, so all the text that is going to be inside the body is going to have a text of emerald 800, which is slightly darker, or much darker than this rather. And then finally, I've set the paragraph line height to 1.8 so that they're just spaced out just a bit. Okay, and then we have our loading state here, and then we have our profile.js. And now what I want to do is in the profile.js, I'm going to remove all of this inside the article. Just remove it. And then you know what, I can return an h2 that says profile. And then we can remove this. And then finally, for our loading state, all we have is a div with a class name of font bold and text 3xl that just says loading ... And that is our loading component. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to run npm install, which is going to look at our package.json, and it's going to install all the dependencies that are necessary for this project to run. And the dependencies that we want to install are datefns, which is going to help us to format the dates. And then we also need to install tailwind css, post css, and auto prefixer, so that these files, the tailwind config.js and the post css config.js, actually work. And if you want to learn more about how to install tailwind, you can go into their documentation. So let me run npm install, and then once this runs, I want to run npm start. So I'm going to let this run, and then once it finishes, then we're going to continue. Okay, so once that finishes running, you can see that our local server is opened on localhost 3000. And I forgot to mention, but if you try to run this command and it doesn't work, it's probably because this is not recognized. So you'd have to run npm install first, and then you run npm start manually. Okay, if you're on Windows and this doesn't work, then probably you should check whether you're using CMD command prompt or you're using PowerShell, because PowerShell doesn't support this. So let's begin building this out. Let me go into my app.js, and inside here I'm going to set up my state values. Let's have const, let's say users, and set users. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default I want to fetch from my repositories. And then we need to also have a state value to hold the data once we fetch it from the API. So I'm going to set this into items. So const items and set items. This is going to be equal to useState, and by default it's going to be an empty array because we're going to populate it once we run our use effect. And then now below this, and you know what? We don't really need this. We don't really need this because there's nowhere where we're going to be referencing that function. So let's go ahead and have our use effect hook, and then inside our use effect I'm going to add an empty array so that it only runs on the initial render of the app component. And then inside here I'm going to create our function to send the GET request to the API. So I'm going to say const fetch repos equals to async, and then I'm going to say const response equals to await fetch, and then I'm going to pass in this. So copy this and pass it inside backticks, like so. And then I'm going to change this into our state value of users right here. So I'm going to say $ brackets users, and then I'm going to say const data. So the data that we get back is equal to await res.json. So convert it into JSON, and then I'm going to say set items into data. So what this means basically is that we need this GET request to run every time that this user's state value changes. So for example, if you are to change this into another username, then you want this to run and to display the correct repository for the corresponding username. Okay, and setting items to data here also ensures that we populate our state value. Let's go ahead and call the fetch repos function like so, and then inside here we can now say something like items.length so that we can see whether this is actually working, and we should see 10. There we go. So we have 10 items. Fantastic. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to check our loading state. So I want to add in our loading state, right? And remember that we created our loading. Okay, we didn't really create our loading component, but this is our loading component. Very simple, right? And we need to import it on top. So I'm going to enable this. So import loading from loading, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to check whether items exist, right? So when items exist, then we want to render our text, right? And then when items does not exist, then we want to render our loading component, right? And we can do that. So let's try and reload it. Of course, it's too fast that you can't see anything, but if I change this into no items, then we should see infinite loading. There we go. And I forgot to mention something. Since we're on the free tier of this, then we are only limited to 50 requests per hour. So if we exceed that, then this is not going to work. So always monitor that. Now I don't want our loading state to be at the end. I like having it on top, but this also works, as you can see, but I like having it on top. So I'm going to change this up. I'm going to cut this out and bring it here, and then place my full colon, and then remove this one at the end, and then this is going to work. We should see 10. There we go. Okay, and then now let's structure our return. So inside here, instead of returning items.length, I want to return, let's return a section, and then inside this section we're going to get an h1 that says viewing users repositories. So inside here we are accessing the user's state value, which is this right here. By default it is this. So we're going to be saying viewing someone's repositories. Okay, so if you were to change the state value here, then this would also update. Okay, so we have, there we go. And just to show you, and let me style this out, let me make this bigger. I'm going to give this a class name of text-2xl and font-bold, and we should see this. There we go. And then now if I change this into something like Florin Pop 17, then this is also going to update. There we go. Okay, fantastic. Now what I want to do is inside this section, right, inside this section I want to have a class name of padding on the Y of 20, so that this pushes downwards, and then it's also going to have a padding on the bottom of 20 so that it doesn't go all the way to the bottom. And you know what, this is a bit big, so let me change this into padding on the top of 10 and padding on the bottom of 20. Okay, and then once we do that, now we can create another div inside here, and inside this div we want to render our profile component, which we need to enable right here. So enable the profile component, and we should see profile. There we go, we should see profile. And then now what I want to do is, instead of just rendering this, I want to map over the users, I want to map over the items that we get back and then display the profile. Okay, so inside here I'm going to say items.map, and then I want to get, for every item I want to return the profile component. Okay, and remember that when you're mapping over items in React, then each item that you get back needs to have a unique key. So in this case I'm going to say item.id, which is coming from the repository, from the API. And then inside here I want to pass in the rest of the items that we get back using the spread operator. So I can just say ... item. So what this means once again is that just grab every other property that is available and pass it into this component. Okay, and then now we can access these properties from our profile component using props, which is the short form of properties. So let's save this, and we should see, there we go, because there are 10 items, right? There are 10 items that we're getting back, and there are 10 items, by the way, because we are setting per page here to 10. So if I change this into 20, then we're going to have 20 items, as you can see. But for now, actually, and you know what, I want to change this into 6 because I only want to get 6 of them, because we're going to be displaying them as a grid. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6. And you know what, let's do that. Inside here, let's have a class name of grid and grid columns -1 with a gap of 5. And then for medium screens, let's change the grid columns to 2, so grid cols 2. And then for large screens, let's change the grid columns to 3. Okay, so let's save this, and we should see profile, and there we go. So now what I want to do is I want to add in the profile data, and in order to do that, I'm going to place this to the right, and then I'm going to place my code to the left so that I can go into the profile component, so profile inside here, and then we can begin getting the items that we need. So inside the profile.js, you can see that I'm getting the props inside here, and what this props is basically what we have passed in inside here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to create an article with padding all round of 5, with a BG of white, with a rounded border of large, with a box shadow, and with a shadow color, so shadow -emerald let's say 300, like so. And I'm using emmet to do this, and these are Tailwind classes, by the way. We install Tailwind when we run npm install. And then inside here, let me have an image which is going to be blank for now, and this image is also going to have an h2 that says the name here. And actually now let me save this so that we can see what we have. Okay, so that's what we're going to have. And then what I want to do is I want to have margin on the top of 10 so that it pushes away from this title. And actually no, that's not what I want to do, because as you can see, it now adds margin of 10 on all of these. So let me remove this from here, and then let me add it into this div right here, so margin top of 10. And there we go, and then save this as well. So now the image source for this is going to be coming from the API, right? So we can access the properties in the API by saying props.owner.login, .avatar_URL, that is the source for the image. And in case the image fails to load, let's go into props.owner.login, which will display the name of the person. Okay, and then for the h2 here, we just want to say props.owner.login. Okay, and I've just remembered that I've not showcased the API, so let's go ahead and do that. You can see that now we have Florin here with his name. Okay, so let's go into the API by opening up this link. Okay, zoom in a bit. Okay, so you can see that from the API we have an ID here. So this is the unique key that we have used in our app.js for our profile component here. So item.id, we are accessing this, and then we have the name of the repository here. We have the full name for the repository, and the private here is set to false. And owner.login is the name of the person, so that's what we're getting right here, owner.login, but we have to get it from props because we have not destructured it on top. And then owner.avatar URL is the avatar URL. So if I open this up on a new page, you can see that this is my avatar, right? And then what we're also going to get is the HTML URL, which is the URL to the actual repository. And then we're also going to get a few other things such as the created at, so that we can display that this repository is created at this time by this person. And then we're also going to get the stargazers count as well as the watchers count. We're also going to get the language, and we're going to get the topics inside here. And then if it doesn't have topics, then we're going to figure out how we're going to handle that. Okay, so those are the main items that I want to get from this API. And so let's go ahead and do that. So now once we have the h2, let me place this back to the side. Then what I want to do is give this image a class name of width-20 and hash height-20, and give it a rounded of full so that it is completely round, and then add a slight box shadow on it. And then I want to grab this h2 and place it inside a div like so that I can add some text here. So this is going to be a paragraph that says the name of the repository, right? So this is going to say props.name. And then below this, we're going to be checking whether the repository is private or public. So what I want to do is I want to say that if props.private is true, then I want to render a paragraph that says private. And then if it is not private, meaning it's public, then I want to render a paragraph that says public, like so. Okay, so let's save this, and we should see public. And I think it only gets the public repositories, so that's why you have this. Okay, so I want to style this a bit differently. So if it is private, I want it to have a red background color, and then if it is public, I want it to be green. So I'm going to give this a class name of bg rows-400 with a padding y of 1 with a padding x of 2 and text-extra small. And then I'm going to say text-white with a box shadow. Okay, what else? Let me save this. Let's see. Of course, we don't see anything, so let me grab this and paste it inside here as well. Change this to bg emerald. Okay, and we should see that. Let's add a rounded dash large, and then let's set this to inline block so that it doesn't go all the way to the end. And there we go. So inline block, fantastic. So if it were private, then we would see private here in red, and we can do that by just going here and changing this into negative. So if not props.private, then we should see this, and you can see that we still need to style this a bit better by adding rounded dash large and changing this to inline block. There we go. Okay, but since these are all public, then we need this to be props.public.private, sorry. There we go. Okay, so once we have that, then I want this image to display side by side with this text. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this image here as well as the div and place them inside an article like so, which we're going to style later because I want to get all the data first. And then outside of this article, I want to have a div with a paragraph that says this repository was created at a time here that we're going to add by props.owner.login. So we should have this repository was created at by Florin. And then inside here, we're going to format the date using datefns, which is one of the dependencies that we installed. So I'm going to say import format from datefns like so. And then inside here, we're going to grab this and we're going to say we're going to say format, and we want to format this by passing in new date, and we're going to pass in props dot created underscore at, and then we want to format this in the form of day, month, and year. And then this should say this repository was created but at reload. Let's reload it. Okay, so this repository was created at, oh sorry, this should say on English. So this repository was created on 25 February 2019 by Florine. Okay, and then once we have this, then we're going to create another div below this, and then this div is going to have an anchor tag that is going to be going to the actual repository name, to the actual repository. So we're going to say props.html_url, and then I want this to open on a new page, so target is equal to underscore blank, and then we're going to set the rel here to no referrer to prevent cross-site scripting, and then we're going to just say view repository or view repo really. And then below this anchor tag, we're going to have a UL with two list items, and then the first list item is going to be the number of stars that the repository has, and then the second list item is going to be the number of watchers that the repository has. So this is going to say props.stargazers_URL, sorry, count, not URL. And then this second one is going to say props.watchers_count. So let me save this. Let's see whether that works. Okay, so we have this and this. Now, because these numbers might be a bit hard to read, I want to add a comma or a full stop depending on the region. So I'm going to say .to local string, and then for me it should add commas. There we go. Okay, and then below this div, I want to create another div, and this div is going to be a bit different, where the first thing is going to be the paragraph, and this is going to say props.languages. So it's going to display the main language that is used in the repository. And then below this, we're going to have a UL, and then inside this UL, we are going to be mapping over the topics, and let me show you. So we can have the topics right here, which is an array, right? So if it has topics such as like JavaScript, ReactJs, and so on and so forth, then we're going to be mapping over them and then displaying them. So inside here, I want to say map over props.topics. So props.topics.map. And then for every single topic that we get back, then I want to return a list item with the key of index, which we need to get inside here. So index. Okay, and then we just want to display the topic like so. And then below this, we're going to have another paragraph that says props.issues_count, and then we're going to say issues like so. So how many number of issues does it have? And then we're just going to display it on the screen. Let's save this, and we should see is issues count not one of them? Let me see. Open issues, sorry, not issues count, open issues, open_issues. So there we go, looking fantastic. As you can see now, the topics here are such as applications, coding, and Hacktoberfest, and ideas, and so on and so forth. So let's begin styling this out. Let's go into this article on top, give this a class name of flex and items-center and justify-start. And then let's go inside this div, give this a class name of margin left of 2 to push it away from this image just a bit. And then let's go inside this h2, give this a class name of text-large and font-bold. Okay, let's save this. We have that, fantastic. And you know what, let me change this into capitalize like so that this first letter is always going to be capitalized. And then let's go into, this is actually correct as it is, but you know what, let me make it smaller. So inside this paragraph, I'm going to say class name text-small, and then margin bottom -2, pushed away just a bit from this. Let me say -1. Okay, and then because this is already styled out, I want to go inside this div, give this a class name of margin y of 5. So pushed away from this code, from this block here, as well as from this block. And then I'm going to go inside this anchor tag, and I'm going to give this a class name of underline like so. And then what should we do? We should go inside this div and give this a class name of flex and flex wrap in case the items go all the way to the end, and then items dash center and justify dash between. Okay, and the reason why I'm spelling all of this out without actually saving it is because once again we are limited to 50 requests per hour, and if I keep on saving and reloading, it's going to run out quite fast. And then inside here, actually not, let me save this. Let's see, we have that. Okay, so inside this UL, I want this text to be aligned to the right, so I'm going to say class name text dash right. And then I'm going to go inside this paragraph, give this a class name of bg emerald dash 400 with an opacity dash 75. And then I'm going to say text dash white. And then I'm going to say padding y dash 1, padding x dash 2. Let's give it a rounded dash large border with a slight box shadow and text dash extra small. Let's save this. Let's see what we have. And we don't have any here. Props.languages. What is props.languages? Doesn't exist. Or props.language, not languages. There we go. Okay, JavaScript and so on and so forth. Okay, and then what I want to do now is we want to style these same ones, and we're going to be styling them the same as this paragraph. So let me just copy these class names into this list item right here. Okay, and then save this so that we're going to have that. And then what I want to do now is go inside this paragraph, give this a class name of text dash extra small. And then now we can go inside this div, give this a class name of flex and flex dash wrap and items dash center and justify dash between, so that now they're going to go end to end like so. And then now what I want to do is I want to go inside this UL, and you know what, inside this list item I can change this into inline block, and notice what happens. There we go. And then what I want to do is I want to say margin on the x-axis to 2, so that I'm going to separate out just a bit. Now let's say 1, and we're going to have that. Would you look at that, looking fantastic? Okay. And then finally what I want to do is I want to try and perform a check, and you know what, this margin is a bit too small. Let's go inside this div, give this margin on the top of 5, pushed away from this a bit. There we go. And then inside here, I want to confirm whether props.language exists, because as you can see right here in this repository, it doesn't exist, but it's showing this. So I'm going to say props, if props.language, only when it exists, that's when I want to render this. And let's see, there we go. Would you look at that, looking amazing. And just like that, you can see that if I scale this up, then because we added it, we made it into a grid, then it's going to be responsive. And by the way, remember that we added a max width in our index.css. This max width right here is what is limiting this. So if I were to remove it, then it will go all the way to the end like so. And if I were to add it in and remove the margin of auto, it's going to be on the left. Okay, so margin of auto is also what centers it. And then padding of 1.25 rem is what is adding this padding on the left and right. So if I had to remove it, then it's going to go all the way to the end, which is not really a good user interface. Okay, so for example, what if you want to check for another repository? You can go into the profile, into the app.js, and then you can change your default state value here into, like, let's say Brad Traversy. And then it's going to reload, and then it's going to show you the repository, the 6 repositories. You can play around with this number here if you want. And then yeah, so one thing that you've realized I've done is that I've not added the functionality to change the repositories you're viewing depending on the input of a user. So that is very purposeful, and if you're feeling up to the challenge, then you can go ahead and try to do that. And if you're going to do that, then you're also going to need the state value of set users here, so that you can play around with the manipulation of the input. But for now, that is going to be the video. And yeah, if you enjoyed it and if you learned something new, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.